What I'm providing you this evening is a couple things. One is follow-up from our last work study meeting, providing you with information I've received from our potential affiliate partners after I had posed some of the questions and some of the inquiries that you had raised in the work study session. I'll also be talking about, at a high level, what do these deal structures look like, and then a recommendation toward the end. So first, this is a reminder of where we are and where we've been. Tonight I'm going to focus on the areas here in red. The recommendation, this part here, recommendation for organization or organizations that we would engage in drafting out an LOI, and then under establishing an LOI, this part right here we'll talk about, and that's a term sheet development, and we'll talk about what that term sheet is. This is a reminder of the process plan, and I give this to you because these are the high-level deal points that I have presented now a couple months ago that the board had said, yes, go forward and propose those to potential affiliate partners. Here's the follow-up. After the last work study session, the two questions that were requested to be asked was one of UW-Medicine, and that is, would they continue to be interested in working with us if there were a capital contribution from us? As you may recall, their response to us was, in order to do a deal with you, it would require a lease. It would be a lease agreement, and we also UW recognize that there's need for capital improvement, but we really can't and don't want to take on both of those things. And so it was recommended that and requested, actually, Commissioner Spikers, that we see if we participated in that capital contribution, if that would change their thinking. The other question was for Virginia Mason, and that is, they had proposed a management services agreement, and the question was raised whether or not they would be interested in a management services agreement that was performance-based, so that there was some skin in the game for them, even though it was a much lower level of affiliation structure. So, where are we at? So,
you want to take questions as you go along, or
sir, go ahead. Yeah.
Go back to the previous slide. On the performance-based, how does that give them sort of a buy-in in the process?
Yeah, it's much less so, frankly, than if they were leasing and taking on the risk of operating the organization. But there would be performance measures that they would have to meet on a regular basis. So, for example, the net income would have to be at a certain amount.
So we're talking about their performance as a management.
Correct. Yes. Okay. Their performance.
And on the UW-Medicine, do we have the money to make a capital contribution?
As you recall from the finance report, we project by year end that we'll have nearly $9 million of unrestricted cash that the board could designate for any purpose it wanted to use it for. So, yes, there is capital there that could be invested.
What would you be using that capital for?
The idea was that any affiliate partner is probably going to be interested in, as we are, in the expansion of our scope of services. So as you know, we're very dependent now on our swing bed business, and we're very light when it comes to procedure. And so having surgical capability would be high on that list, but it would require capital investment. And that's what the UW was concerned about, was making the capital investment and the lease payment together.
So if there's only one that they might be responsible for.
The idea was if we could soften some of the impact on the capital side.
Are you getting any reaction to that?
You're getting ahead of me.
Okay.
All right. So actually, great segue. So I want to talk first about UW-Medicine and their response. As you recall, they had said, well, we're out because of those two things. And I want to remind you who the we are here, because it's not just University of Washington Medicine. UW Medicine and RCCH, a for-profit hospital management company, have come together and formed an LLC. And that LLC is a for-profit LLC, and that's the organization that the UW has decided will be the organization to work with Washington area rural hospitals in terms of adding them to the UW network. So if you come into the UW network, you come in through this LLC, and that that branding that you get, I would call it branding light, because you'd still, Capital Medical Center, for example, is the first hospital to enter into an agreement with this UW RCCH organization. They're still Capital Medical Center, but they are Capital Medical Center, a community hospital affiliate of UW Medicine. So it's a sub-tagline for them for the branding. So that's who we're working with. And so I posed the question back to them, and what they got back to me with is that RCCH had run a number of different scenarios already. They actually ran a scenario where they didn't just get a cash contribution from us, they ran a scenario where they got all of our unrestricted funds, and they said they still felt like they didn't want to make the capital investment that would be required, even though it would be much smaller, and do the lease payment. So they said, we're just not wanting to go forward with that. Now here's an interesting perspective for both of those organizations. And they told me, because it's affected their risk profile and what they're comfortable with. The UW Medicine just took an $18 million charge on conversion of their electronic medical record. So I believe that they're feeling a little risk averse right now on that point. The other is that RCCH, which is a Brentwood, Tennessee firm, for-profit firm, is owned by a company called Global Asset Management. Global Asset Management just purchased LifePoint Health. Is that right, Steve?
Yeah.
LifePoint Health.
It's hard to keep these things.
So, yeah,
It really
exactly.
is.
Yeah.
Say that again.
So Global Asset Management, they're an investment firm, and they private equity investment firm. They own RCCH. They bought LifePoint Health, another for-profit hospital company, and they with the intent, and now they're doing this, of merging LifePoint Health with RCCH. And LifePoint Health will be the parent organization or the surviving organization. So you can only imagine, if you're RCCH, you just got told by your buyer that there's another company that they just bought that's going to now own and run you. So their risk profile is probably very low right now as well. The point of all this is that the UW, despite our asking them if our capital contribution would help, said, we're still not there with you. So they're really off the table at this point. Okay?
Is UW still a nonprofit organization?
UW is a nonprofit, but they've linked up with RCCH and formed a for-profit LLC to work on these network development arrangements with rural hospitals.
So UW can be both a nonprofit and with this organization
Nonprofit.
profit.
Nonprofits can actually have subsidiary for-profits. Okay, so that's the UW story. And by the way, they were wonderful to work with.
But bottom
line is they're
no
out.
further
Correct.
activity with UW.
Correct, right. All right, let's talk Virginia Mason. As you recall, Virginia Mason prefers a management services agreement. I asked them if they would be open to a performance-based management services agreement. They said yes. They would be comfortable in further discussions with us with that being on the table. Other points that they made are that they believe that the Virginia Mason brand would be effective in growing our business. They value their brand more than anything. The quote from them is, "Brand is more important than money to us." As such, they want to protect their brand, and they would do that by having full operational control of the running of the hospital and the clinics if we were to rebrand as Virginia Mason. And they would be providing the board with regular updates, including how they're performing on the performance-based management services agreement. So they still want to continue the conversation with us. Okay? Overlake Medical Center. The structure of the deal with Overlake Medical Center would be a lease agreement, an operating lease agreement, where they're paying the district to be able to use its facilities and operate the hospital and clinics. The update is that Overlake had a meeting of their what's called their internal, so it's not commissioners, or excuse me, board members, internal strategy team, which is Mike Marsh and their vice president, their chief strategy officer, their chief financial officer, and they said that they would like to continue to move forward with us to explore what a deal would look like under a lease agreement, a full operating lease agreement. They would like to work with us on fleshing out some of the details. If you go back to this slide here, this one here, this is really what I have communicated to them in terms of the major deal points. They said, great, but let's put more words to that. And I totally agree with them. That is an appropriate next step. They would like to have, so Steve and I met with Mike Marsh and Andrew Tokar, who is their chief financial officer, and we talked with them about what some of those concepts mean to us in terms of the major deal points. We also reviewed the latest audit that we had, so that if they had any questions about our financial performance from 2017, they could ask those questions. They would like a repeat of that meeting with some more of their executive team, and so we've agreed to meet with them and let others have opportunity for Q&A with Steve and me.
Can you spell Andrew's last name?
Tokar, T-O-K-A-R.
Okay, Tokar.
Tokar. I've known Andrew Tokar for quite a while. He was their director of finance for many years and is now their chief financial officer. So back to where we are. In terms of recommending organizations, I'm recommending tonight that we move forward with both Virginia Mason and Overlake in the following fashion. Well, actually, I got ahead of myself. This is just a summary slide. It's in your packet. What I wanted to do is I wanted to let you see on a high level, what are the two entities really getting out of these different deal structures? If you look at Overlake, what do we get? We get brand, we get lease payments, and there's a shift of the income or loss and debt service risk from us to Overlake, because they become the organization for whom the net income is theirs or the net loss is theirs. And
So they're really willing to take a risk.
So there's risk there that they're taking on, that the hospital and the clinics operate well, and the way that risk of debt service moves is because the lease payment enables the district to make its debt service payments regardless of how the hospital performs. What does Overlake get? Well, they get control because they're going to have to run the hospital in order to make this happen, so they're going to have control. If they can run the hospital well, they do get the net income, so that would be an upside for them, and they're able to start to expand their network and grow business on the east side. For Virginia Mason, what do we get? We get a great brand, and we get a promise of performance. That's the idea of a performance-based management services agreement. It's a promise of performance, but we don't actually shift risk. Virginia Mason gets control of the operations, and they also expand their network. So, recommendation. My recommendation is we work with both organizations to develop what are called term sheets. And the term sheets start to document those major deal points with some more specificity. Because right now, it's talk. It's good discussions, but it's talk. And it's time to put it down on paper so I can provide you with something in writing that helps us all evaluate which of these two parties do we want to go forward with under a letter of intent. So that is my recommendation, is that we develop the develop the term sheets with both organizations toward getting an LOI in place. And I'm open for questions.
Anybody have a question for?
I'm just very delighted that you went back to both of those other agencies, UW and Purdue Mason, and kept some kind of dialogue going, because you just don't know.
Yeah.
You know, we're so
Right.
we're in the beginning of the process here. It's always good to keep things open.
I agree that it was very wise to go ahead and Mr. Spicer's suggestion.
Great ideas.
And clear the decks regarding UW. So now we can not waste any more time considering that possibility, as I understand it. Is that correct?
That is correct. And we still have two very high quality brands to work with.
We do, and I think keep them involved to the very last minute, because if we lose one of them, the other one now has total control of us. They know that they're the only option, and they can manipulate us like Overlake did years ago.
Now, my advice to us all is to recognize that between today and the day that we sign an agreement with somebody,
The LOI.
no, I'm talking between today and us signing the definitive agreement, the deal, at some point along the way, we pick one of the two parties.
Yes.
And so at some point, I agree with you, we've kept a lot of people moving forward. We also want to be fair to everybody and let them, and I have done this, by the way, I've let everyone know who is still in play with us. I have not divulged to any of them any specifics. They get some of that specifics clearly if they're listening and watching the board meetings, but that's the extent of it. And at some point, we will pick one of the two parties, as you had said, Commissioner Pollard, to enter into a letter of intent with. But I want to provide us with as much option as possible through the establishment of term sheets so that we'll all be able to see what the deal, as best as possible without having anybody commit to anything. The term sheets are, yeah, we can work under that concept. Now, just to let you know, in order to get to the term sheets, I will be establishing non-disclosure agreements with those organizations. Now, let me just comment on this, and Skip, you keep me straight on this. But the non-disclosure agreements allow the parties to have these conversations together, establish these term sheets together, and have that work not be subject to a public records request until such time that you, the board, make a decision that is based on all that information. Once that has happened, we've now, for that party, exited the deliberative process, and those documents are subject to public records requests. I have explained that clearly to both of the parties, and they understand that that's what it's like to work with a public hospital district.
One thing that I think is interesting is that Overlake and Virginia Mason already are at least on the east side and in Issaquah, so they're closer than
They're
UW.
great geographic.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah.
I couldn't hear.
I'm intrigued the fact that it's Overlake and Virginia Mason because those already have entities, clinics in Issaquah. UW, I don't think does. And whenever
Well,
I
they haven't had anything in Issaquah.
yeah, when you need anything done, you got to go to Kirkland and Redmond.
Well,
Yeah, I must say, I have to make a comment. I'm so glad and pleased that we went this route, having CEO and CFO taking the bulk of the work without having to contract. I know eventually we will have a consulting.
it'll be attorneys.
I know that,
Yes.
but at least the initial second process that we're doing was, not initial, the process that we're
Thank
doing
you.
now is, an effort from our own executive team
And-
rather than
Thank you.
hiring another consultant.
And I'll say
to
that
do
I can speak for Steve, that we have actually very much enjoyed the work.
Thank you, yes, and this is great experience.
Yes.
Are there any other questions?
Just to clarify, at the beginning, when you started talking LOI and agreement, I didn't follow the dichotomy between the agreement, which I think a final agreement follows the LOI.
Correct.
But you seem to imply that the agreement would be before the LOI.
Yeah, thank you. I'll clarify that. So between now and the end, there are going to be 3 agreements. The first one is a non-disclosure agreement. That's really easy. The next one is a letter of intent. And the letter of intent will contain in it the basic terms that we'll work on with the term sheet. And it's both parties saying, we're now engaged. We really think we can put a deal together. Now we're going to start the due diligence process. Now we're going to really dig into each other's information, quality, financial, customer service, all that information now we start to disclose to one another. And then at the very end, the deal that really finalizes it is called the definitive agreement.
Well, this is really interesting and I think very good, because what I was afraid of is that we enter into an LOI with one of them and then we're at their mercy.
No, we could exit the LOI and go back to the other party if our due diligence process results in us saying, well, it's really not for us.
So actually, we're doing a sort of draft LOI for both parties.
We would do what's called the term sheet for both parties. I'll present that to you, and you'll say, we want to go down the path with this party or the other. You don't want to do you could, but it's just more work than is necessary, because the real critical information for you is what are the terms of the agreement, the high-level terms of agreement that both parties would be comfortable with. Once we decide, well, that's the group, or that's the organization, and those are the terms we would like, then we'll draft an LOI around that.
I see. So once you actually sign an LOI,
Yes?
you've got one
You're working with one partner, because what that does is that initiates the due diligence process where you really start to get into more detail.
You stated that we could back out if the due diligence
Yep.
process presents problems that we don't.
Either party can leave the other one at the altar.
You're in an LOI.
Under the LOI, there are terms there's terms of disengagement, terms of termination, and you can either enact those or let the LOI expire.
I think I understand.
Okay?
Are there any other questions?
Just a comment, I think it's nice to have this CEO interconnect with the same CEO that future partners that we are, so you can see it face-to-face.
True. Without the middle
Right,
person. Yeah.
personal and
Yeah.
more personal level.
Good.
You know,
Thank you.
Professionally.
Maybe this is premature, but if you look at history of mergers and partnerships, my understanding is that Overlake has not consummated a partnership or a merger with any other organization, whereas Virginia Mason has. Is that correct?
It depends on how you define it, but in terms of a merger with an organization where they really integrate the operations of the hospital and/or clinics, that is true. That said, Overlake has done a fabulous job of putting together the clinically integrated network with Evergreen, and that's actually a force to be reckoned with in this market.
It's a little different.
It is different. It's not the operational integration.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Next, we have resolutions. Resolution 545018, temporary construction easement, Panorama Apartments LLC. And we also have our surplus equipment. Do we want to do those separately?
Madam President,
Yes.
may I comment on the first one?
Yes.
I want to comment on that because staff were directed to accomplish a couple of things with that easement. Number one, we were charged with getting a quid pro quo. And we have done that. Actually, Commissioner Pollard walked the back of the hospital with me and took a look at that sidewalk that needs repair. And if you think of sidewalk squares, the big sidewalk squares, there are 5 of them that are in a crumbling state. And so Panorama has agreed to repair those. It would be a full replacement of the concrete there. And they'll do that at such time that they are actually pouring concrete on their site. And I think that makes a lot of sense. The other thing was that we were asked to make sure that they provide signage that the pathway for their vehicles constitutes a work zone.
Yes.
They have agreed to that, and that is in the agreement as well. And so we're feeling good about the work with them.
Are you getting liability in accord for what they?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Steve gets that. We get that with everybody we work with, by the way. King County Search and Rescue.
Yeah.
We get that with everybody.
That's really necessary.
Yeah, and so we're feeling good about the easement, and they also, as you probably already know, they've also agreed that if any damage occurs to any of our property because of their use of that lane, that they'll repair that. Okay.
And the indemnity agreement, which is really good in case they run over a pedestrian on our property. They have to indemnify us for any lawsuit against us.
Yeah.
And Skip's done the
So that's,
That's
for
a
me,
good
that
one.
was key. So I've read the agreement, I like it, so it's fine.
Thank
I
you.
guess he just gave you a compliment. Council Hauser. Okay.
No, it's okay.
Do I hear a, first we need public comment.
For the second.
Oh, the second resolution, that's the surplus
Any
equipment?
questions on the surplus?
Surplus equipment?
So are we trying to do this as a consent
Separate.
agenda?
This is just discussion about these. We're gonna have public comment and then we'll have action.
Okay, let's do a public comment.
Okay. Do we have public comment? We do.
Hi, Scott Scowcroft, West Seattle. Just a couple of real quick things. One is I was delighted to hear that the Key Leaders Summit is occurring again this year. It takes me back to my first week when I was employed here at the district. Roger McCollum suggested that I go to Encompass and talk with Nancy Whitaker, and she brought in Christine Trione Sullivan from the network, and the 3 of us kind of got together and came up with a Key Summit, Key Leader Summit. And my assignment was to come up with funding for it. So I went out and found, I don't know, $2,500 grant for that. And the hospital district underwrote the cost of the Key Leader Summit for the first 3 or 4 years that it was going. So I was very heartened to see that it's still part of the fabric of the community. And I guess the other comment that I have is that, man, the first part of this meeting sure seemed to be pretty heavy with some parliamentarian discussions, just worrying about things in terms of the parliamentarian procedure that at the end of the day really aren't all that important. And I hope that you can streamline those sorts of discussions so that you can have more time and more oxygen in the room for things like the last half of this meeting, which I thought was really terrific. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comments? Hearing none, we're going to move on to our new business resolutions. Actually, yeah. So do we want to do these as a package? Do I have a motion to do both resolutions together, or would we like to do them separately?
I make the motion for both at this time, to approve both.
Do we have any?
I second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, I place before you resolution number 5450818 and resolution 5460818 surplus equipment. The prior one was the temporary construction easement. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And no opposition, so they both pass. More public comment. All right, next, I guess we're other. Do we have any other this evening? Hearing nothing for other, our next scheduled meeting, work study, will be August 22nd, 2018, 6 o'clock in this same conference room, correct?
Right.
And our next regular meeting will be September 13, 2018, 6:30 in the North-South Conference Room. Do I have a motion
I
to
make a
adjourn?
motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There are no opposition. We are adjourned.
Okay, so.